Affairs don't begin in the bedroom, they begin in childhood. In the part of you that decided she needed to bury her truth just to be loved. The part that's now screaming to be seen. I'm Alex Croxford, and this is the Deeper Love podcast, where we name the shame, face the guilt, and help you find your way back to yourself. So let's begin. So if you have been in therapy, or you have read loads of books, you've listened to loads of podcasts, and you still feel haunted by what's happened, then this episode is for you. And here's the thing. I still have therapy. I love therapy. Therapy to me is like a warm hug. And it was so integral during the early stages in the aftermath of my affair. And I still have the same therapist, 5 years later. So I am not here to bash therapy. Let me just be very clear with you. But what I am here to do is to explain to you and to offer a different viewpoint on why it may be that you still feel stuck, even though you have been doing all this healing work, in inverted commas. The reason is therapy helps you understand. But understanding or insight doesn't always lead to feeling different. And in fact, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that makes decisions, that chooses to do something consciously, like I just went downstairs and made myself a cup of hot water and lemon. That was a conscious decision. I went down there, I chose to do it. I wanted to have lemon. I decided I didn't want to have green tea. That was all happening in the prefrontal cortex. That was happening in my conscious mind. But that part of my brain is not connected to any kind of wound that is stored in my body or my central nervous system. So when we just stay in the mind, when we just stay in thinking and processing, and that also entails reading and listening and gathering more and more insight, we can have a different cognitive view on something. We can maybe see something. Oh, yes, I see that my father was X, Y, and Z, and that's why I chose this partner. Or my mother was like X, Y, and Z, and that's why I also do X, Y, and Z in love. We can see that, but seeing doesn't shift things, because that part of our brain that is seeing and is having the insights is not connected via neural pathways to the part of our body where the wounds are really stored in our nervous system. So betrayal or infidelity in itself also isn't just a cognitive issue. You can't think your way out of the shame or the guilt or the numbness that you might feel around your affair. Because this is a somatic, emotional, and spiritual issue. The number of times women say to me, I understand why it happened. I get why it happened. Like, my marriage was empty. We weren't having sex. We were living different lives. We were barely speaking to each other. I understand why I ended up with somebody else, but I still feel so broken by it. I still feel like I am a terrible person, or that I shouldn't really be forgiven, or that I need to keep punishing myself. And that's because therapy, alongside books and alongside podcasts, support the mind, but the mind far more than they support the body. And whatever you are experiencing right now in your body or in your emotional world didn't begin with what's happened recently. It woke up something far, far older that is stored in your body. So, if, for example, you grew up in a childhood where you were told that you had to prove to God that you were good, that you were a sinner, and your whole life you had to prove that you were the opposite of that. Or if you grew up in a household where you were shamed for your sexual energy. So, as a young girl, our sexual energy comes online around the age of 6 or 7. You might notice it if you have children or nieces or nephews who maybe start to explore their bodies in ways that make us feel very ashamed and tell them to stop doing that. They need to stop touching themselves. Don't touch there. The thing about that is when a young girl is shamed for how she's exploring her sexual energy, she receives this as a message that there is something innately wrong with her, because as humans, our sexual energy is the core of our creativity, is the core of who we are. So if we are told that that part of us is disgusting and we have to hide it, and we have to stop, the child receives that as, I am disgusting. I have to hide myself. I have to stop being me. And that story and that shame gets stored deep in the nervous system, not just in the thinking brain. Like most of you might not even remember a moment where you were shamed for that. Some of you might, some of you won't. But I remember I particularly had a moment when I think I must have been 6 or 7, and my then boyfriend, I mean, he was like 8, there was nothing untoward about it. We decided that we wanted to do I'll show you mine and I'll show you yours. So, very innocently in the garden, we'd kind of made a den out of garden chairs, and my younger sister was there too. And the three of us were in this little den, and myself and Andrew kind of, took our pants down and I'll show you mine if I'll show you yours. And we very innocently touched bits, literally so innocently, just what children do. After that, we moved on. Nothing was said more about it until maybe a day or two later when my mum and I were in the bathroom and she shut the door of the bathroom and was very, very concerned because she'd heard from my younger sister that Andrew and I had been showing each other and doing all sorts with our private bits. And my mum, coming from her own experience and her own life experience, was really, really worried about this and was questioning me quite heavily about what happened and was I okay, and she was just doing the best that she knew how in that moment in time. And we've talked about it since, and she's even said, oh, I feel so guilty for that conversation. But you know what? She was doing exactly what she needed. She was doing exactly what my soul asked for in that moment. And I experienced it in that moment that there was something wrong with me. I was bad. I was disgusting. I shouldn't have done this. And so this shame that's now stored deep in my body from a very young age, I begin to live my life through this experience of being the one who is ashamed of who she is, or who is disgusting, or who is bad. And I begin to attract people, places, things that keep proving this story that I carry back to myself. And there would be no amount of thinking or understanding that could have shifted that experience of shame that was stored in my body. I could have known that story and I could have understood, oh, okay, so in that moment I experienced shame, and now I experience shame a lot as an adult. But that would have not actually healed what was in my body. What actually truly healed what was carrying in my body was going into my body rather than just talking and thinking about it. If it lives in the body, which all of our emotions do, emotions that have not been processed yet, then it has to be healed through the body. And often the emotions that are stored deep in the body from frozen moments in time in the past are frozen there because there was no way for that child to complete the emotional cycle in that moment. So in that bathroom with my mum, I was experiencing so much shame, but first of all, I wasn't able to name it at that time. I was barely able to name it at the age of 35. But I wasn't able to name it then. And so therefore there was no empathic adult to hold me in that experience of shame. And then it got stuck. Almost like imagining a train running through a tunnel. If you imagine the energy of an emotion, which is energy in motion that needs to run through the tunnel in order to come out the other side, if there is something that blocks that train from running all the way through to the other side, it's going to get stuck. And that energy that was in the train has got nowhere to go other than staying in the body and creating whatever else it needs to create within the body, starting to create a nervous system that is coming from the story of shame, which is I am bad. And so this is why there is such a need in the betrayal healing space to come into the body. And it is a key part of healing one of the most traumatic things that I believe two humans can go through. It's so important that we start to look beyond just mind healing. We have to get into the nervous system. We have to get into the body. The body doesn't shift because the mind understands something. It shifts when it starts to feel safe. It shifts when it starts to feel the sensation that we experience rather than we try to run away from it. It shifts through being able to sit with the shame. And I don't mean getting lost in the shame. I mean being able to witness the shame as a sensation, as an energy, as an experience in our body, rather than getting lost in the story that our mind starts to tell us about it. I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I've done this. I don't deserve to be loved. I'm disgusting. I'm broken. I'm bad, right? That's the story. There is a sensation that goes alongside that story. And if you can sit with the sensation, don't get me wrong, this is not a comfortable thing to do. But when we can sit with the sensation by maybe closing our eyes and breathing, finding the sensation in our body, just staying with it, we are actually helping that frozen shame in our bodies start to move. We start to give it space. We start to allow what needs to move to actually move. The train begins to start up again and begin to work through the tunnel. And that doesn't happen in one go, right? This is a long-term practice of being with your emotions, of being with what the experience is in your body. Like, we have to give ourselves enough space and enough time to be able to do this. And the thing is that when a woman finally is able to feel her emotions, not from being able to talk about them or being able to just collapse into them, but actually have the capacity to be able to be with whatever she is experiencing in her body, then things can start to move. The shame can start to lift. The anxiety doesn't become like this heavy cloak or this heavy weight or this gripping vice around our neck. Because rather than trying to run from it, rather than trying to think our way out of it, we actually come into it. And coming into it gives it the space it needs to actually move. One of the women recently in the sanctuary talked about how she can cry. For the first time, she's being able to cry in her life. And that is liberation. Because when emotion does not move, it gets stuck. And when we say we feel stuck, that's one of the reasons we feel stuck. Feeling alive, feeling free, feeling liberated, feeling in touch with our body means being in touch with all of the sensations, all of the feelings, everything that needs to move through us. And there's so many stories that we carry about feeling, especially as women. We're told, oh, women are over emotional, or we learnt as children, big girls don't cry, and, turn off the waterworks, or you shouldn't be crying. I'll give you something to cry about. All of that 80s and 90s parenting that we experienced means that so many of us don't even feel safe to be in our true emotions. So that's why, yes, therapy, talking about it in therapy, crying about it in therapy is beautiful. That is one part. But there is a whole other world that exists within your body, not just in your head, that will give you a key to a door of liberation, of freedom from this. We don't just cry because there is something wrong with us, or we're breaking down, or we are weak. We cry because something in us is safe enough to finally let go. We feel the shame, we witness the shame because something inside of us is finally safe enough for us to see that and to feel that. And it maybe never was before. And we get to create that safety inside of ourselves by being with, by slowing down, by giving ourselves time, by not rushing around from thing to thing, by not trying to just talk it over, by trying to listen to another podcast or read another book or hurry on through this. There is no rushed way of doing this. And this is why I created the sanctuary, because therapy is beautiful for insight, but it was the somatic healing that brought me back to me. And we don't analyze what's happened in the sanctuary. We don't go over what was wrong in your relationship. We don't go over what was wrong with your childhood or what was wrong with you. It is none of that. The sanctuary is about getting to heal what lives underneath all of it. And so if this speaks to you, and if you are still carrying it, if you are ready to stop holding it all alone, then the sanctuary is open. It's a space where we slow down, we soften shame, and we come back into the body so that you can actually feel again. It's £277 a month, open now. Cancel any time after the first 3 months. If you follow the link in the show notes, then you can save your spot today. I can't wait to see you in there. Thank you for listening to the Deeper Love podcast. If today's episode spoke to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're ready to go deeper, you'll find all the ways to work with me in the show notes. Until next time.